the closer we can get back to helping people learn how to create generational wealth and to create things that will ensure that they live a happy life all their life, then that's when we're going to get closer to eliminating some of these ills of society.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hennche. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. I'm your host, Hennche. Today I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Jim Biggs. Jim is the founding partner of Jiroma Enterprise, specializing in syndication and investing in medium to large multifamily apartments. He also leads the GOB Network of apartment investors, a non-profit educational platform focused on commercial real estate. This episode is filled with valuable insights on investing, achieving success, and giving back to the community. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you here today. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about where your money mindset started.
That is an interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that, but I would say probably while I was still in high school. So I was raised by foster families and lived in foster homes and orphanages when I was a kid. Started school late. When I first entered the Child Protective Services, whatever you want to call it, I was already 8 years old, had never attended school. So in high school, I was still struggling with basic reading and had no interest in school whatsoever. I was only interested in sports. And I had one of my football coaches that actually gave me a couple of books to read that were short books, easy to read, that had an inspirational message. And I started going down kind of that path, and then started thinking, okay, I want to make a lot of money so I never have to be poor again. So I started reading as much as I could about mindset, and not necessarily about building wealth from a educational perspective or from an academic perspective, really more so just inspirational messaging and things like that, which eventually led me into signing up for these mentoring programs. And I've been a part of a lot of different mentoring programs over my lifetime. I'm 66 years old, and I've been a part of dozens of those platforms. And I would say in hindsight that there's some value in them. But at the same time, I would say that very few people learn to make money and learn to build wealth through those programs alone. I think it's a journey. Some people get there very, very quickly. Some are like me; they're slow learners, and it takes a lifetime. So that's where it began.
But so I actually find myself, I think, if I look at my wife, for example, she's very quick to get to things, and the way you express it, I find myself more in your camp. I'm like, okay, I need a little bit more time to learn it, but I'm willing to go at it, and if it takes twice the amount of time, I don't care. Like, it's just a pace I'm working at. Did you ever feel like this is a hindrance, or did you just feel like this is just a pace you're learning?
Yeah, I accept who I am. Some things I've gotten better. The more I learn, the better I learn. And it is, something that it's like building a foundation to a house or to a building. You just keep putting things on until, it gets higher and higher and higher, and you get better at it and you understand the process a lot more. And so that never really bothered me. I've always felt like it's a journey that I'm trying to get to. And I've never been one that, and it probably comes from most of those motivational, inspirational books, that's like, the only time you lose is when you give up. The only time you lose is when you quit. And so I've never seen a failure or a setback as an end to something that I just said, okay, I tried that, it didn't work, and I'm never going to try it again. Instead, it's just, okay, failure is part of the process. And the more I fail, the closer I am to a success. And that has proven to be a successful formula in my life, but not necessarily a fast one. I do envy people that that learn the things that have taken me a lifetime and learn them at a much, much, much earlier age and have already figured them out. So, I've got people that I have mentored that are in their 20s that are already syndicating their first apartment deal, as an example. And, it took me a lifetime of being a business owner, a small entrepreneur, and going through many, many, many different opportunities before I ever did my first syndication, or before I ever even knew what a syndication was. So I think that the opportunities to expand your mind and to learn about all these different things with the internet now, podcast, meetups, all of this stuff is so readily available to folks now that if you want to learn, it's out there. There's nothing that you can't find on YouTube University, or somewhere else.
Yeah. I love the way you coined that. For me, YouTube was literally the university. I think if I can accredit anything with the main part of my modern knowledge that has come like after a formal education, it's definitely YouTube.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that you would learn at even the very best, highest educational institutions in the world that you would not be able to find for free on YouTube.
I mean, what's so mind-boggling is also the kind of people that are going straight to the consumer now. Like you have Bill Ackman and Ray Dalio and whoever you want to listen to, who is straight there. Like some of them, Ken McElroy has his own channel where he shares in real time. You can literally watch him live every other day of the week. And like the kind of access to, great minds that before you wouldn't have any access to.
Yeah. And especially not in an interactive way. It amazes me how many of those folks are willing to share their experience in this kind of format, and how accessible a lot of them are. And for most of us, we're not gonna be the one that gets to interview them, but every once in a while, somebody will pop up that's a really, really, really big influential name on the smallest of podcasts. And it's like they had the nerve to ask, and for some reason they said yes.
Literally 5 minutes before I got on, I was wondering, one of my wife's co-workers interviewed James Clear last month. And I'm like, how did this happen? And I'm like, James Clear is quite a household name by now. He's a, and I was like, maybe just ask.
Yeah.
So it's a good lesson. Maybe we should ask more
Yeah.
often.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely fall in that camp of I'm not an extrovert. I like to say I'm a practiced extrovert, but I still struggle with things like that, asking and even accepting. As you contacted me a few times before I responded back. Some of that is how busy I am, but there's some of it that's just timidity of being an introvert and saying, you still doubt yourself. No matter how old I get and how much I've accomplished, there's still a lot of self-doubt. That's just part of your personality that maybe you can change it, but it's taking a long time for me to do so.
Mm-hmm. Earlier you mentioned failures are basically part of the learning curve. When did they really sink in with you, where you were like, didn't feel beaten up for too long and you actually like, okay, onward, upward, got my lesson here? When did that really sink in with yourself?
Well, I think I've learned, every book I've ever read, every deal that I've been a part of, whether successful or not, every failure, every person, literally almost every person that I speak to, I come away with something good. So, from the beginning, I've always taken something and I'm like, okay, I felt confident that I can do this, and I felt confident that I, whatever it was I was trying to accomplish at that moment, I'm not one that has a lot of self-doubt about my ability to do it. It's more so, especially when it's only on me. When it becomes harder is when you feel you're responsible for the success of partners, whether they be general partners or limited partners, investors. Then it becomes a much more difficult decision. I'm the type that, if you've ever heard the expression, jump out of the airplane and build the parachute on the way down, jump in the water and then you'll learn to swim. That really is me in in the way I operate, not necessarily when it comes to dealing with other people. Although generally, I've gotten to a point in my life where I know if I want to meet people, if I just spent $500 to go to a conference and I seen you there and I wanted to meet you, if it was just a casual thing, I might not come up to you and just start speaking. But I just paid $500 to meet people like you. I'm not going to let that opportunity pass. Whether I'm introverted or not, I'm coming up to you, I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to speak. And, hopefully I can find some common ground to the speech interesting enough that we learn more about each other. That's what I consider a successful networking event, is when I can engage someone in something other than an exchange of a business card, which I'm perfectly happy with, as long as I get to follow up and we have more of this conversation, which is the most wonderful thing about COVID, was all of these types of conversation that came about because of video meetings and meetups and virtual meetings and all that. So been a wonderful, wonderful outcome of that.
Yeah. And then there's, business card is one thing, but without like actually something clicking, there needs to be some kind of genuine recollection of something that is worthwhile picking up on. Otherwise, people just run around collecting business cards, and I don't think they will actually get a real return on the trip if they don't make a genuine connection.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of statistics around that, but it's not always about how many business cards you collect. It's really about how many of them you follow up on and make a real connection. When you get back home from that, how many of them can you contact in the first 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and moving forward. And every day that goes by, there's a bigger chance that connection is going to be lost. And they're, either they've lost interest or they don't even remember who you are, or whatever that looks like, which is, I think there's a lot that can be done for people to become better at networking. But one of the key factors in my mind is you always want to have a hook. And that can be something you say, it can be the way you look, it can be the way you dress, it could be some antic that you performed, but any little thing you can leave with somebody that helps them remember you is something that you want to practice when you're in those networking environments. So
yeah. So what inspired you to bring the GOB network alive?
So I've retired now 3 times. It doesn't seem to be taking. So the GOB network was after my last retirement. So in 2020, March of 2020, it was when we first had the initial outbreak of COVID. And I was in the middle of a very large deal at that point. And that deal wound up not happening because of COVID. And I lost a lot of money in that deal. And I was already close to retirement age. I had already retired from a W-2 job to pursue this full time. Now, I've done that a dozen times in my lifetime, where I left a W-2 to pursue real estate full time, went back to a W-2, come back to real estate, another W-2, back to real estate. But the difference in that last one was I was already really close to retirement age, and my wife had already retired. And so my wife is a lot more cautious than I am. She's definitely not going to build a parachute on the way down. And she said to me, basically, I'm really, really nervous about this, and I'm not comfortable. And I don't know if my nerves can take this. And so I said, okay, I'm done, actively doing these things. We'll just, if we continue, we'll continue only from a passive investment standpoint. And so that was not the only time I've had an unsuccessful venture in my lifetime, but it was definitely the biggest and the hardest, and it really hit me hard. And my middle son had recently moved to Hawaii, and I had a grandson that lived with us here in the Chicagoland area for the first year of his life, because my son didn't want to just pick up the whole family and move to Hawaii. So his wife stayed behind because she was pregnant. The baby was born and stayed with her, and the baby stayed with us. But when he said, okay, this is going to work out, and brought them to Hawaii. So we went over there to decompress, evaluate our life, think about what the next phase of our life was going to look like. And we went over there with the intent of staying a month, 2 month, 3 month, whatever that looked like. And because it was COVID, and he lives on Kauai, the northernmost island, the island population is relatively small compared to how many people are usually on the island. But, most of those are visitors and tourists. And my son said, Dad, I know how much you like the outdoors and hiking and being, out in nature. He goes, they've got this thing called the Grand Canyon of the Pacific. And he said, you should really try to see a lot of these touristy things while there's no one else here. And I literally drove to the top of the mountains where that canyon is. And I drove into a parking lot, and there's multiple parking lots going up these mountains and all along. If you can imagine the Grand Canyon, there's hundreds of sites that you can pull up to and view the Grand Canyon. Same thing here. And most of them had parking for 50, 75, 100 vehicles, with like 5 bus parking where, 30 to 50 people are going to unload out of the bus. So you can imagine how many people are at these things normally. I'm there, there's no one there but me. And so I got to, explore that. And I wound up going up there every day and staying up there for hours and literally going out to the edge of the canyon because I could, because there was no one else there to stop me and say, hey, you can't go past here. And I'm sitting on the edge of these cliffs, looking out over this canyon, and just really, it was almost a spiritual thing for me. And I think it was the first time in my life I had literally let down my guard so completely that I could see things that normally I don't see. Normally, I told you, I have blinders on. I'm moving forward. I'm taking the step, doing the thing. I'm not looking at all the things that could go wrong. And I'm not looking at all the naysayers, listening to them or anything else. But now I'm like, okay, I'm retired. What am I going to do? And looking back on my life, I'm like, how many times I had owned so many small businesses, but every time I would sell one and move to the next thing, I always went back to real estate. And I would always join a mentoring program because I'd feel like, okay, you're behind, you need to catch up. So the fastest way to catch up, according to all those guys, is join their mentoring program. And long story short, those things have a really, really, really high dropout rate, and an even higher rate of people that don't succeed at what they paid for. So when you pay someone 30 grand, 50 grand, even 100 grand, you're expecting big, big things to happen in your life. And for probably 95% of the people that are in those programs, those big things never happen. And I thought, man, any other business, that would be a horrible return on investment. That kind of failure rate would not be accepted in most business or most institutions. And I thought, you know what I can do in my retirement years is give back. And so all these programs that I've been through, all the knowledge that I've gathered through the last 40 years of doing this, I can give back. And it's not like, we talked about YouTube University. It's not like all that information isn't available for free. It's just that it's hard. That's why you pay someone, is to get access to it all at once. And so we decided the thing that would make us different, our magic formula, if you will, would be to offer all of that for free. And that was the original, if you know the history of Bigger Pockets, that was the original pretense for starting Bigger Pockets. When Josh Dorkin started Bigger Pockets, it was like, it was anti-guru, anti-paying for these educational platforms. I'm going to make all that for free. Now, eventually it started moving further and further and further away from that, and having more of a membership driven and, getting higher access and higher access. And I'm like, in order for me to remain true to that perspective, I'm going to set this up as a nonprofit so that I literally have to remain true to the nonprofit motive. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
allow myself or whoever takes over after I'm dead and gone to change this to a for-profit model. And so that's what we did. And we started offering that. It grew really, really fast, way faster than I expected it to, and literally got out of my control. And so this year we're trying to refocus and kind of reevaluate where we are and what we're offering people and how to move it forward.
Yeah. I'd like to zoom in a little bit on that moment when you were sitting up there, overlooking the canyon, almost like a spiritual experience. Like, what was that like for you to actually, for once, take off the blinders and just like experience that vastness, that openness, and have the freedom to explore that by yourself? Like, and I think whoever dared to venture out during COVID, I have a couple of those moments in beautiful places where there was nobody, so I can relate to it.
Yeah, I've always lived a very, very high stress life. I'm a workaholic, and I've always been advised you need to learn to settle down. I love that line in Saturday Night Live, simmer down now, and I've tried over the years to learn to meditate. I'll give you an example. I love the concept of the miracle morning. Are you familiar with, okay, the
Yes.
miracle morning?
Actually, I have
Yeah,
the book sitting behind
yeah.
me.
And I've read the book a couple of times and I love the miracle morning, but I have a really hard time practicing it, especially the meditation piece. I've just never been able to do it. My mind just goes all over the place, and I've got 1,000 things that need to be done. I always feel like I'm behind. I always overcommit. But there, because I had allowed my mind to say, you're done. Your work life is done. You're at the end of your life. It's time to retire. What are you going to do? Are you going to travel? Are you going to play golf every day? What are you going to do? And I just felt so much pressure and a feeling that I had never had before. That must be that Zen people talk about when they reach that point of being able to meditate. It really was the freest I've ever felt. Now, the outcome of that was I wound up putting all the pressure back on myself and officially unretiring again. I'm working harder than I ever have.
Maybe from a different spot. It sounds like
Yeah,
it comes from a rather sense of fullness that you
yeah.
experienced and service.
I do feel more like I'm giving more, I'm educating more, and I'm getting a lot more fulfillment from what I'm doing now than I ever have with anything else that I've done in my life. And I always have loved teaching. I never considered myself a teacher, but coaching people up and using that sports vernacular of coaching people up. Early in my career, I did a lot of sales. One of my first companies involved a lot of sales, a lot of training, teaching people how to sell and things like that. So I've always loved it, but it was not ever practiced on as big a level as I am doing now, and not giving it away in such a manner that I never really expected anything in return. And, so that part of it is extremely satisfying.
Do you feel like this is something that you could have started earlier in your life, or do you think like it clicked in this
No,
moment and
there's
that's
so
where it
much
came
money to
from?
be made in this particular thin sliver of the industry, teaching and coaching and mentoring. There's so much money to be made there. And I've always been money motivated. It would have been strictly a money play for me. I could make so much money doing this if I wanted to do it the traditional way. And so I don't think I could have done it earlier in my life. But my intent was to help people learn to do this. And I honestly felt like I had wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars in these programs and never gotten back what I felt I should have gotten back. I didn't learn very much in these programs after the first one or two. because honestly, all of them are teaching the same stuff. So why did I keep going back to them year after year after year after year? It's because I still hadn't got to the point that I wanted to get. So from the real estate perspective, it's like, okay, I have a deal. I have found a deal. You taught me how to go out and find a deal. I have a deal, but I either don't have enough capital or I don't have enough experience. My SREO is not big enough. For those that are in the industry, that's schedule of real estate owned. It has to be a certain depth to that document before the bank will allow you to buy this big property. Same with your PFS, your personal financial statement has to be at a certain level before they will loan you the money to buy this property. If you don't have that, then you need to partner up with someone. And in our industry, syndication's always about partnerships. And so I would go join a program and say, look, I've got a deal. I need a partner. They go, well, we only partner with our students. Okay, here's my money. Will you partner with me now? And what you find out is they usually then have another excuse, which is, well, we don't partner with the brand new students. You know, you need to do a few deals with some of the other students. And if you're successful,
you need to go to the next level of the pricing tier.
Yes.
You know, you enter at 30 and then, oh, there's a $100,000 tier. We only partner with those.
And so I tried that over and over and over again. And eventually I think, you know, I always had the blinders on. It's like, okay, I just didn't have the right deal, or I just didn't find the right program. I just didn't find the right mentor. And so I just keep repeating that process over and over again. And when I was in Hawaii, on the island of Kauai, when I was on Kauai and had that moment, it was like, you've done it wrong all these years. Everyone is chasing that same dream. What if instead there was a program where instead of giving you 30 grand, 50 grand, or whatever, you said to me, I'll teach you all this stuff and I'll partner with anyone who has a good deal, anyone. And so you don't have to be a special tier to get me to partner with you. You don't have to have a certain level of experience. You just have to have a good deal and everything makes sense. So we eliminate that obstacle. The other obstacle is if you find a successful deal and if you ask me to partner with you on that deal and we become partners, you and I are partners, then I'll reinvest that money into the deal. So the investment you're making is not really in me. It's in you're saying to me that if you teach me the right way to do this, I know I can get my money back. All I have to do is go out and find a deal. It's the motivation that you need, I think, in order to make that happen. Now, ultimately, I have not done that yet. I've started out with a three-legged stool concept, which one of those three legs is using the IT model of a freemium model. So if you think of Google, you know, they give you all these free things, Gmail, Google Drive, Google Voice, Google Sheets, Google Docs. They give you all of this stuff for free to get you into their ecosystem. And then once you're there and they have you deeply involved enough, you know, you want to build your first website and you do a Google website and a Google suites for your business. And now you have to start paying for these things. And so that model, that freemium model, you build enough momentum and add enough value until you eventually get to a point that now you can start to charge for these other add-on pieces. And so that's one of the main prospects for us is, look, we will get to the next phase for us will be to get to a model where we will say to you, it's going to cost 30 grand, you know, if you want personalized coaching. But the caveat is once you get your first deal, you get most of your money back. Like, you know, we're going to have a certain cost of doing business. And for the sake of argument, let's say it's 5 grand. So once we get your first deal, we're going to put 25 grand back into that deal. And that's written into a contract that says when you find that deal, if it's it meets all of our metrics that we're going to teach you all these metrics. And if it meets them, we're going to reinvest that money back into your deal. So that they say everyone has unfair advantage. That's the unfair advantage, one of the unfair advantages that we're trying to build in this network. And we're trying to lay the foundation for something that we want to be here 40 years from now. So a lot of our goals intentionally are 40-year goals. A lot of those we're hitting much, much faster. But our goals are always long-term goals because I think short-term thinking allows you to get too greedy and to make too many mistakes because you're pushing too hard to make things happen right now.
Mm. I think companies that operate on quarterly thoughts, I'm like, yeah, I find that so interesting sometimes. There's healthy businesses, and because people miss quarterly reports and then investors relocate their money, I'm like, the business just is healthy. Like, what are you doing? You know, it's like, and sometimes I think about that in terms of real estate. I think people are actually lucky that they don't have a minute to minute update on what the real estate value is, what are the net operating income, and and they only see it in timestamps, like either the monthly or quarterly reports, and they don't reevaluate the entire real estate
Right.
thesis that they had for this particular syndication, for example. And I think this allows them to sleep well. Like if it, like for example, I think one of the things that drives people crazy in crypto is that it can be traded 24/7. So the next step down would be the regular stock market hours trading, which already drives people crazy because if you have a big portfolio, you will have big swings, like it goes up and down by like tens of thousands of dollars a day. But in a real estate portfolio, you don't see that, so it allows you to sleep well.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I find it really interesting and also really funny that if you're a day trader, or even if you're not a day trader, if you invest in individual stocks, most likely you follow the stock market daily, most likely. But if you're investing in a fund through your 401k, you probably don't even reevaluate it yearly. Most people get hired, pick the 2 or 3 funds they want to be in, set it and forget about it. And the next time they look at it is when they get fired and they have to move it, or they decide to move to another company and they have to move it, then they reevaluate it. They don't really look at it. They set it and forget it. And yet we find that in investors that come into most multifamily syndications, or most syndications where it's multifamily, storage, RV, mobile home, whatever it is, most of them, in evaluating, the fear is, well, my money's going to be tied up for 5 years. My money's going to be tied up for 7 or 10. And that's a big stumbling block for most new investors in syndication. And they don't even hesitate when it's the stock market. And they don't have anything real in the stock market. They don't have an apartment building across the street that they can go out and say, yeah, that I own part of that. I'm one of the owners of that apartment. They can physically see what they have. And if they want to improve its value, they have a direct input. All they have to do is go out and paint it, mow the grass, plant some flowers, and they don't have any of that influence in the stock market. None of it. And yet, they're more concerned about the decision to make. And a lot of that is, most of these investments are much bigger. You're not buying 10 shares at $100. You're buying, usually most of these syndications have a minimum investment of 50 grand. Now which is a barrier to entry for a lot of folks. And one of the reasons we recently started a fund with a much lower barrier to entry, we started a customizable fund so that people could come in, even if they wanted to come in at a higher amount, they could allocate it across several different assets. And they get to choose how much goes into which asset. And so they could allocate, instead of owning one property at 50 grand, they might own 5 properties at 50 grand. Or if they only have 10 grand, they can come in and just have one property at 10 grand. So that is, I understand the trepidation and the fear and the hesitancy when it comes to that, because it's a big number.
But the interesting thing is, there's also a penalty if you pull out the money out of the traditional retirement schemes. So there is a lockup. It's just, obviously there is liquidity, but there is a lockup, which many people don't think about. There's also that event that, yes, the money might be available, but it comes at a penalty.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big barrier to them taking it out. Although I know a lot of people that have closed out their 401ks to buy into an educational program because they were promised that the return on investment, once they buy that first deal, they'll double their money, which it only cost you 10 grand to get out of your 401k, and you're going to make 30 grand in this deal. So, do you want to walk away from 30 grand? And that's little selling tactics like that is and always was a burr under my saddle. it always set the wrong way with me, and was a big inspirational
But
factor.
that just sounds wrong
Huh?
because I feel like let's actually play this through in our mind. Let's say you have 100 students, and as you said like earlier, maybe 5 out of those will actually get that
Yeah.
return on their money, and the other 95 they'll pull out that money prematurely. And I think that taking that into consideration, it's not ethical to highlight the 5 that made it and like lead the other
Yeah.
down the wrong path.
But let's admit that in sales, no matter what it is, whether it's selling, an educational program or something else, this is very common in this industry.
But I think part of that is like, okay, I think there is a way to be an ethical salesman. I think there is a way to be like, okay, yes, we understand that you need to make that investment and you might need to be creative where the money comes from. But I think when it comes to somebody's 401k and that's like literally their life savings, it's in the same way that, if you have an 506b, you don't want to take the last money from somebody who actually can't afford to put that 50k into your syndication. Like it's just not the way to do business.
Yeah, that in its best form, I agree with you 100%. And which is a major reason that I started the GOB Network, because that is not common in our industry. It should be. It should be common in every industry, but it's not common. Honestly, it's not common in hardly any industries. It's not. It's not common amongst a lot of companies. That type of integrity is, the older I get, the more I realize how rare it is. And I hate to be so jaded, but I think there's a reason why there's an image of the grumpy old man, that is so prevalent. As we get older, one of the things that happens is you become less naive. The more you do, and the older you get. And I am probably, for a 66-year-old, still one of the most naive 66-year-olds around. But compared to my 20-year-old self, there are light years difference. And there is a lot of ways for people to be taken advantage of. And you see the divisiveness in our societies now. And I think that as much good as the internet has brought us, it's also brought to the forefront how many people there really are that are willing to be divisive and create chaos, if you will. And it's does not give me a warm, fuzzy feeling. And I still believe that if you're looking at the whole of things, I still want to believe in the goodness of mankind and the goodness of people. But I'm not as naive as I used to be to believe that almost everyone has good intentions, has great integrity, and will do the best thing for you instead of doing the best thing for them.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's just that the world feels so complex at times that you want to have simple judgment making, and it's like, okay, let's, for example, you go to the doctor, you want to trust
Yeah.
the doctor, you don't want to question a doctor and go to 3 other
Yeah.
doctors and kind of like cross-examine them and like, okay, who actually knows what they're talking about, who is not just going for the commission from the medical provider. It's living the hard way by taking that radical responsibility, but it also obviously leads to different results.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not if it were, the old expression, if it were easy, everybody would do it. Whether it's being successful in business, being a successful investor, a successful syndicator, or a successful mountain climber. If it were easy, everybody would do it. And that's also, you look at society, that's why we only have 40% of people voting. People get so wrapped up in their day-to-day life, and their day-to-day lives have so many decisions and so much complexity that we want everything to be easier. But it's only when you embrace the struggle and you get comfortable being uncomfortable that you grow. There's a reason why when all I do is sit around and talk on Zoom calls and telephone calls for 5 years, all my muscle mass has just gone away. You have to embrace being uncomfortable and doing the hard work at everything in life if you want to get more out of life.
And I think actually, in the same way that a mentorship program has maybe a single digit of people who actually succeed and the rest kind of fades away, I think this is true on a larger scale for life. It's like there is a single digit percentage in every nation,
Yeah.
probably, of people who have an exceptional life for themselves. Then there's a large average, and then there's a single digit or so that have a horrific life. And it's all kind of based on like, okay, what challenges are they willing to take on for themselves?
Yeah, it to your point, it is so complex. If I wish that if anything for the next 40 years, if we get to a point that we can extend life long enough for all of us to get to a level of understanding and wisdom to be able to say we've eradicated poverty the same way we've eradicated certain diseases, and we've educated everyone on the face of the planet to a point that they don't feel stuck by the circumstances they were born into. And if you're willing to be curious enough and work hard enough, I do believe that anyone can become whatever they want to become within reason. I can't become Michael Jordan, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't be a great basketball player, even if I was average. You can look at someone like Steve Kerr, which, I shouldn't be naming basketball people because not everyone's going to know who that is, but he was on the championship teams with Michael Jordan. Very average player, but he made a place for himself because he was one of the hardest workers, and he learned to become a great shooter. And anyone can be a great shooter. That has nothing to do with your athletic, God-given athletic ability.
Yeah.
And so it's a technical thing that he learned and he practiced so much. And so I do believe that you can lift yourself up out of poverty with enough curiosity and hard work. But the path to that is so crooked, and there's so many different paths. There's not one path, there's thousands of paths. And if you're stuck there, how do you know which path to take? How do you have the confidence to know that this is the shortest path? This is the right path. This is one that's going to lead off a cliff. You don't. And that's things that we can improve on. Those are things that I think as a society we can work on, both internally within the United States and externally throughout the world. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that there's people out there that want there to be poverty. It serves certain entities and certain people for there to be worker bees. We can't all be boss bees. There's got to be a lot of worker bees. And so a lot of systems are in place to kind of, like the educational system in the United States is really meant to build worker bees. And I think there's a lot of fear that like, well, I don't want the competition. I need everybody to be a worker bee. I need poverty. We need low paid immigrants. But I think that that's what used to be called in some circles stinking thinking. That's not the right way to approach things. And it's not, I think, an accurate perspective, but it does serve a lot of people. And when we can get to a point, and society can get to a point that we all believe that everyone, trust me, not everyone wants to be a boss. Not everyone wants to be a chief. There's lots of people that are really happy being Indians and really happy being worker bees. A large part of my life, I never thought beyond that, never thought beyond being, and there is a lot of comfort in having security. If you look back into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and even 60s in this country, you could count on working for one company for 30 years and then having a nice retirement and the gold watch and having the ability to live out the rest of your life in comfort. And we no longer have that. And I think that the closer we can get back to helping people learn how to create generational wealth and to create things that will ensure that they live a happy life, all their life, then that's when we're going to get closer to eliminating some of these ills of society.
Mm-hmm. One beautiful thing here is, I'm not sure if you know Hans Rosling, he actually already passed, but he had a beautiful way to look at data and said like, hey, we do think that the world gets more extreme, But in the data, you see that the average human on Earth has never lived
Yep.
better, has never been healthier, has never had better access to healthcare. And there's still a lot of
Yep.
work. I'm not saying there are no problems, but like if you look at the history of mankind, it's never been
Yep.
better. And I think that's a beautiful
Yep.
thing. And this is also where, you with the GOB network making a dent, because you're allowing people to have a platform to learn for free, at least initially, and so that they can educate themselves and elevate their
Yep.
family. And I think every time that somebody in a family starts to educate themselves, they becoming like the one that also influences and inspires the people around themselves. Like the funny thing about people around me, they usually tend to turn healthier over time because I don't eat crap. I work out on a regular basis. So if you spend enough time with me, it might rub off.
Yeah, I still believe that's true for humanity, and I hope that I'm right. And I'm trying to live the life that I believe is, something that at least when I pass, I'll feel like I made a contribution and I left something behind that is greater than what I was and will serve more people, hopefully into perpetuity.
Yeah. Well, Jim, where can people connect with you in GOB? What's the best place to find you?
In the interwebs, I don't spend near as much time there as I used to, but the easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm Jim Biggs one. As far as after the LinkedIn piece, that's and if you just type in Jim Biggs, I'll probably pop up 3 or 4 times on the first page of any internet search. But we also, if you're an investor and interested in some of our deals and want to get access to some of our deals, we have the gobfund.com. If you're interested in education, we have the gobnetwork.com and or the gobnetwork.org. Either one of those will take you to a place where you can start. And it's at this point in time, it is a self-learning platform. It's basically, I've created a massive library of information and given you the key and say, everything you ever wanted to know in life is in that library. It's like the Library of Congress, but there's no one in there but you. So you can't go to the librarian and say, help me find this. You've got to go to the card catalog and say, oh, okay, I'm interested in X. That's on shelf B. I've got to go over there and read this material myself. It is for the Renaissance man and Renaissance woman. If you're self-motivated and you can embrace self-learning, then you'll get a tremendous amount of value. If you're the type of person that needs hand-holding and coaching, we are in the process of starting to build coaching programs for those folks. I know there's a ton of them out there. And if you're currently in a coaching program, look, the best way to get a great return on investment from your coaching program is to embrace the fact that it's still up to you to get out of it what you want. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to put that on the teacher or the mentor or the other folks in the program, you're not going to be happy with the results. So if you get nothing more than the name, email address, and mobile phone number of everyone else in that group that you're with, then every penny you spent was a success, because that'll be the foundation for everything you do moving forward.
Yeah. Well, Jim, thank you so much for your time.
And it's been very insightful. A pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.